So as a leader, you said that you've been a clinician for graduate students. What does it mean to you? What does leadership mean to you?
For me, it's difficult to think of the word leadership without thinking of the word servant. And I think that anyone that dares to step into a leadership role needs to have that level of humility and to understand that you will lead by example. And the best leaders aren't afraid to get their hands dirty and to role model what it takes and not set these unrealistic expectations or that now I'm in this position, so I'm too good to do that.
Welcome to the Find Your Influence podcast with Anton Guinea, where we unpack all things influence and we help leaders particularly find their influence by talking to amazing humans and finding out what influence means to them, who they've been influenced by and who they have influenced. And this podcast episode proudly sponsored by the Guinea Group of companies. The Guinea Group helps leaders upgrade, upskill, uplift their teams and their influence. Welcome to our viewers and guests. Welcome to the Find Your Influence podcast with Anton Guinea. Today we've got an amazing guest, as we always do have. We've got the amazing Vann, MALPCS, which I'll get Laurie to explain soon. And we're not sure what some of those acronyms are. They'll be psychology related, I would presume. Laurie is a Texas-based behavioural health leader, a licensed professional counsellor, a supervisor, which is what the LPCS stands for, and prevention-focused, I love that, mental health educator known for translating complex clinical issues into practical, implementable strategies for organisations, schools, practitioners and families. Laurie is the founder of Vann Wellness and the Institute for Non-Suicidal Self-Injury. Beautiful. Where her work centres on prevention, intervention and stigma reduction. I like that too, for self-harm and related risk behaviours. More than 25 years, Laurie, of clinical experience across inpatient psychiatric settings, outpatient services and private practice. Laurie's positioning sits at the intersection of clinical credibility and real-world training impact. Was that okay?
Yes, that's excellent. Thank you.
Right. What did we miss?
Oh, gracious. Well, in addition to all those pieces, I've written 4 books on self-injury and co-authored another book with a lawyer and former school board member, international speaker, and then lots and lots of media interviews.
Wow, congrats, well done. And what, just from speaking to you in the past, I know a lot of your work, as I said in the intro, was around the self-harm stuff, yeah?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
For our listeners and viewers, Laurie, that aren't familiar with, I guess, maybe some of the precursors or some of the reasons or even the way that shows up, maybe you could bring our listeners into your world and some of the work that you're doing to try and really sort of, reduce the incidence of self-harm and prevent that from occurring.
Yes. Well, I always like to start by saying that for self-injury, it's by far much more common than what people realize. That in the United States, I can say it's probably around a 30% lifetime risk. It's not just a teenage thing, because that's one of the big assumptions of, it's just teen girls and that's it. And no, that's not the case at all. It starts in childhood, like early childhood. I've seen this downward shift where it's starting at ages 8 and 9. And it absolutely starts in adulthood too. I have a women's self-injury support group that I do online that's actually, available internationally. And so I've had probably over 10% of individuals that start at 18 or older, and several that were in their 30s, 40s, or even 50s when they first began the behavior. So part of it is getting rid of these myths, these assumptions about who does it and who doesn't do it. And males most definitely engage in this behavior. And why I get really passionate about it is because there's over a 60%, probably closer to 70% correlation with suicide. So when someone starts to engage in this behavior, the vast, vast majority of the time, they either have started to have suicidal thoughts, or they've maybe even done some gestures, or they're going to be on the road to that when maybe the self-injurious behavior no longer works as a coping skill.
Wow. Laurie, you're doing important work, is what I'm thinking.
Oh, thank you.
Seriously. That's yeah, and I must admit and this is one of the reasons that I was so keen to talk to you, because we spoke over in America, and I really, I thought, wow, one, I didn't realize the scale of the issue, and when you explained it like you just did then, it was sort of mind blowing, really. And so from a suicide perspective, in Australia, we have things like mental health first aid, and we have some other programs here, suicide awareness stuff. And I think even for the general populace, it's okay for us now to ask, are you thinking about suicide? And I think we've come a long way in some of the ways that we deal with it societally. Are you finding that in the States as well? Is there a bit of a shift towards general support?
Yes. And what I say is that while things like COVID were absolutely horrible, there were some silver linings that came from it. And for the United States, where mental health has been pretty stigmatized, and some parts of the US more so than others, but there was such a mental health epidemic that was already going on prior to 2020, but with everything related to COVID, it didn't just put gasoline on this dumpster fire. I say it put napalm on it. It was that bad going into it that it only exacerbated it that much more. And because you had to respond to it at that point, that's where people started to talk about it. And I know I had a lot of counseling clients that sought counseling for the very first time in their lives because of things were so bad. And again, it was all age groups. It was really not just, oh, well, students are struggling because they're losing out on their memories and connecting with their peers. It was adults. It was absolutely adults were coming in for the very first time ever to seek counseling because they went, I don't know how to deal with this. This is an unknown entity. I don't know how to respond to this. Some people being traumatized by the whole experience. And so I think that we made more strides because, well, we were forced to. And I see still more people talking about mental health. The question for corporations is that, are they just giving the lip service to it, or are they actually acting on what they're saying that they do for their employees?
Nice. Great question. And let's unpack that. So from an influence perspective, I guess, maybe organizationally, I think if you're a business leader, how do you influence your organization to maybe embrace it, to non-stigmatize mental health? Like, have you worked with organizations, Laurie, to help them do that sort of work?
Yes, I've actually done consulting work with several different organizations, ones that were not just located in Texas, but on the national and even on an international level. And what I would say is the attitude about mental health comes from the top. And it's what the CEOs or the different C-suite people, what they're saying, but more importantly, what they're doing. It is their actions that are going to speak much louder than whatever memo that they put out there. And that's what's going to drive the change in corporations.
So for example, Laurie, so if I'm a C-suite exec out there listening to this and I'm sort of struggling with this whole, well, what can I do to really, elevate the narrative around mental health? What could I do from an action perspective? Could I have conversations? Could I, take time off myself if I need it? Like, what are some of those things?
I think it's some of those things in addition to when, let's say, an employee does bring up a mental health thing, how does the C-suite respond to it? Do they stigmatize it? Do they make it difficult for that team member to take some time off or to find the resources that are needed? Is there a level of trust within human resources? Because that's something that comes up quite often, is that clients will come to me and say, I don't trust my HR. I don't trust that they're not going to share whatever I mentioned to them. And in states, that's illegal. Like, the HR is not allowed to share any of that kind of information with the other employees or managers. They can just say, like, hey, they're going on disability, but they can't say the whys for it. Or they'll say, hey, they need to have this accommodation, but they can't give the details behind it. So that's a piece of it. It's also C-suite people, and this is going to be maybe a little unpopular opinion here. They need to maybe show a little bit of vulnerability themselves. That maybe they need to open up, and I'm not saying they have to do full disclosure and share all of their skeletons in their closet, but to just say, you know what, there have been times in my life where I didn't have all the answers. There were times in my life where, yes, I or a family member needed to seek another opinion, whether that was with a coach or with a counselor, or that, you know what, I have an aging parent too, and I'm not quite sure of how to navigate this transition between being a caregiver for my parent, but also still being a caregiver to my kids that are at home. And it's challenging. And C-suites can do that in a variety of ways. Memos are very impersonal, but if there's like a little, video message that they could send out on email to their team.
Right. So demonstrate the human side. So be human, I guess, Laurie, is probably the great way to put it.
Yes.
And that's great advice for C-suites, whether it's mental health, whether it's anything. Just be human, We've got AI coming, and then we've got this whole leadership thing going on, and how do you humanize the planet, and how do we humanize our leadership? That's such great advice to our leaders out there. Thanks for sharing. And talking about influence, Laurie, so you've probably influenced, how many clients you've had over the time to potentially change their behaviour and to hopefully see things differently so that they can choose a different path and make different decisions in their lives based on the trauma or whatever reason is causing some of that self-harm. So what does influence mean to you? What does the word influence mean to you, just in general terms, maybe first?
I mean, we know what influencers are in social media. We know what influential people are as politicians or as other types of celebrities. And those are well and good. But I think with any level of influence that you have comes great responsibility and humility. So for me, I see it as an incredible opportunity, not to do self-promotion, look at all the things I've done, but more of a servant perspective. And that's how I've always led my business. And I've had several different businesses, whether it's the coaching, the speaking, or the counseling side of it. Everything to me is led through how am I serving others? And when you have an attitude of service and being a servant leader, it makes you more human, for one, but it takes you out of your ego and gets you focused on the things that need to be focused on.
Whoa. So what you're saying, Laurie, is, if you're an influencer, the best thing you can do is make it not about you, actually. Is make it about the other person and be there to serve. Wow. You're probably the first person that's articulated it like that, Laurie. That's amazing. That is so cool. Actually, we had an Olympian on, Sam Fricko, who's an amazing young man, and when I asked Sam about being an influencer, because he's got a couple of 100,000 followers online, and he said, Anton, I don't make content for me, I make it for my audience. And I thought, wow, that's powerful, And that's how you be an influencer. You do things that serve. Wow. Thank you so much, Laurie. That's amazing. So talking about influence in your life, Laurie, let's go back to maybe where all this started. And was there a human in your personal, and a lot of people say their parents, but maybe your professional life too, that got you? Like, did you have a psychologist somewhere as a role model, or did you just stumble into it? Or, who's been the influence in your life?
It's been such a variety on the personal level, of course, family. My parents have been a huge influence on me and their values, their beliefs. My dad was an entrepreneur, so I most definitely get it from him. And that started at a very young age of like probably 6 years old, and trying to find ways to raise money so I could buy something. So I would put on shows in the living room and charge tickets for it. My early performance days. And my mom has absolutely been an influence as well of resilience and not letting people get to you, and having that tougher skin and more of an attitude of like, well, if you want to do it, you go do it. Don't wait for other people. Don't always depend on other people, because a lot of people are going to disappoint you. So just be prepared to do it yourself. And so that's been a big piece of it. From a professional side, I've had contact with many wonderful counselors. It's hard to draw it down to one on that piece. So I go a little bit more on the business of where my dad was a big part of it in that segue, and he helped me understand a lot of things about business. And then I would say in the last 8.5 or almost 9 years now, my current business coach for that length of time, JT Fox, has been a massive influence. He has provided a lot of opportunities that I would never have had access to. His way of thinking has absolutely changed how I see business, how I see coaching, how I interact with people, just the focus. There's been so many different things that he has influenced, and in addition to meeting incredible people from all over the world.
Love it. So on that, and of course, that's where we met at a JT Fox event. So massive shout out to JT. Thank you, JT. What's one of the, you mentioned it was how you coach, how you do business, how you interact with people. What are, for our audience, for our listeners and our viewers, Laurie, what are some of those, or even what's the biggest thing that you've learnt from JT? What's the goal that's just changed your life or your business?
There, at different times, it's been different things that have resonated. And I think that as a business person, as an entrepreneur, as well, just a human being, that as you go through life, there should be those kind of changes. Different stages, different lessons are going to resonate differently for you. So the thing I've been really honing in on within the last year, and something that was always there, but hearing his reinforcement and his other coaches that he's brought in to reinforce the concept of relationships, because it is all about relationships. And as he says, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. And that matters. It really does. Because I could say I know a lot of people, and I do. But how many of them am I the top of mind? How many brand ambassadors do I have? And so that's a different level of thinking, and just the concepts with branding. And again, it's not about me. It's if people get to know me, then I can better serve them. But I can't serve a wide audience unless they know who I am.
Beautifully put. And for our listeners out there, I think that's great advice. And our viewers, it used to be, it's not what you know, it's who you know. But now, as JT puts it, it's who knows you. And the Anton-Guineaism on that back end of that too, Laurie, is when they need to know you. So you've got to be at front of mind all the time, and that's that relationship piece, so that you're in contact is the way that I'd take that away from Joe. Beautifully put, and I'm the same. That's the biggest thing, biggest takeaway for me. So And one or at least one of the speakers, one of the high level speakers from Mega Success has already agreed to come on the podcast, I think, which is cool, Darius.
Oh, wonderful.
No, so cool. So cool. Build relationships, Laurie. I love it.
Yes.
Now, Laurie, this is a really big question, and this is a unique question for you. And I'm really looking forward to asking you this question because I think so. So when I ask leaders, so in relation to influence, you've had a big influence on human life. You've changed lives. You're a psychologist basically, and you probably saved lives. You could tell us a story about saving lives. And I'd love to hear one of those. Is that okay? Like when I talk to leaders, I'll say, oh, I've elevated this person, they got a promotion. But I'm interested in your story of who you've influenced the most. What do you look back on? What are you most proud of?
Oh, gracious. I have served over 650 individuals with a history of non-suicidal self-injury. And I have, for my interns, because as a supervisor, then I have interns underneath me. And I don't even know how many hundreds of cases over the decades that I've assisted them with when they've been working with clients that engage in self-injury. So it's a lot of times I don't necessarily like to think about like what that number represents. And then all of the clients I've had that had suicidal ideation and ones that I know that I was an influence in bringing them back from that, from those very, very dark places. And worked to, assist them in moving their life forward versus taking it. It's extremely humbling. And I don't like to think of the number because if I do, and I really put that in context, it becomes a little bit overwhelming. And I'm more of the like, but there's more to serve. And I just need to keep moving forward. And that's some of the things of what I'm doing with the Institute for Non-Suicidal Self-Injury and how many more people I can serve and really dialing that in on not just Texas, but national in the United States and definitely internationally. And I have some resources in place to do that, but making it that much more available because it is an epidemic. But yeah, I've had some very, very challenging cases that, halfway through, I'm like, I'm not sure where this is going. Yeah, I'm not sure are we going to be able to reach their goals? There's so much that's going on. And then there's a corner that we just start to turn, and it might be very gradual. And then it starts to build momentum. And I can think of, one woman, I started to meet with her when she was a teen, and she had so many different diagnoses. There had been so many things going on there that was one of the ones that's like, oh, okay. Is this going to work? Is this going to change? And then with time, one diagnosis after another started to fall away. She stopped her self-injury. She stopped the suicidal thoughts. The disordered eating stopped. The psychosis stopped. The social anxiety stopped. It was just, it was phenomenal.
That's life-changing for her, yeah?
Yes.
Even if you just stopped one of those things, let alone all of them. Let's take social anxiety, if you could help her be more public facing, for example. And wow, congratulations. Like, I know you're too humble to think about it like that, but can I ask you really, like, this is probably just off topic again. Is it ever scary for you? Like, is it ever confronting maybe for you?
There's some nervousness that goes with some cases where I start to get into it and maybe things aren't happening as rapidly as I would like. And there's a little bit of, I'd say, apprehension of going like, okay, am I out of my league? Is there someone else I need to refer to? And that's part of just being a good clinician is realizing your limits And if you find out something is out of your wheelhouse, or you're not as adept at it as what that client needs, it is your ethical obligation to refer them to someone who that is their wheelhouse. I am huge on ethics, and it's always about doing what is in the best interest of that client, period.
Beautiful, beautiful. And they're lucky to have you, Laurie. Keep up the great work. Well done. Love that. Can I ask, did you choose self-harm, or did self-harm choose you just because of the need for it? Like, it chose you.
Yeah, it did. It started off, and I think it was either 99 or 2000. And I had a girl, I was still an intern. So I have my master's degree, but then in Texas, you have to do several thousand hours to be fully licensed. So I was in that part of it. And I had a girl come in, I could see the marks on her arm, and she told me she was engaging in injury. And in 99, 2000, self-injury wasn't discussed. It was even more stigmatized. It was just very hidden. It was going on. I mean, it's been going on for millennia.
Has it really? Right.
Yeah, it's gone on for a very long time. I mean, there are biblical references to it. In Hammurabi's Law, there's reference to it. Yeah, it's been around for a while. And I remember going like, okay, well, this is interesting. They didn't really cover this in graduate school. Yeah, so I just started to dive into research. And then shortly thereafter, I had another teen girl that was doing it. And, doing research and understanding and finding what I could on it. And then I moved to working inpatient psych on an adult unit. And I had a lot of adults that were engaging in that behavior. So it just blew that theory of this is a teen only thing and go like, no, these are adults in their 30s and 40s. They're engaging in this. So that was a little bit of a paradigm shift. And just everywhere that I've gone, I've encountered more and more individuals, such a variety of ages, and no one was talking about it. And it was more of this is interesting to me. And then I started to educate other counselors, and then it just sort of spread from there, where I've trained, I'm not really sure what number to even give, like upwards of 5,000 or more mental health coaches, people throughout the world that I've trained on non-suicidal self-injury education.
Congrats. It was interesting because I was wondering whether sometimes passion work like this that, you're so invested in sometimes comes from self-experience. And I didn't want to obviously ask you that question, but sometimes it's, it's like I've experienced this, I want to go on. But this is very, very different for you. This has come from seeing it in others and wanting to be the solution.
Then the light bulb went off because I started to realize that some of my friends, when I was in junior high, and this is back in the late 80s, that it started to click. It's like, oh my gosh, they engaged in self-injury. Like, I didn't understand it on the time because it wasn't discussed. Like, and in the late 80s, this was not discussed at all. There was no point of reference. There was no social media. It wasn't in movies. It wasn't anywhere. And it's like, oh my gosh, that I know for a fact 2 of my friends engaged in it. And it didn't click until I started to study it. I'm like, yeah. And both of them I know had a trauma background of different types. And then I started to think of other peers that I was in school with and sort of demographics and profiles and things that I knew. I'm like, I bet that they engaged in it as well.
Mind blown. Gee. And thank you so much. Thanks for being so open about this topic. I know it's your life. It's funny you should mention that, no one talked about it in the late 80s. We didn't talk about much in the late 80s. You and I are old enough to remember that, and if we did, it was only negative. It was, it was very quiet. We can use all the big words like misogynistic and, blah, 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 blah. But, Yeah, we didn't have some of the positive discussion. I don't think we had the platforms then, Laurie, that we do now. Like we've got a real platform like this to be able to, share some good messages, and let's hope that most people use it for good. I'm sure some people don't, but anyway. Hey, being a leader, Laurie, so, the work that we do is leadership, and we upgrade, upskill and uplift, and we work with leaders on their influence skills. That's it, and that's what Find Your Influence. So as a leader, you said that you've been a clinician for graduate students. What does it mean to you? What does leadership mean to you, Laurie? Just as a different sort of a question.
For me, it's difficult to think of the word leadership without thinking of the word servant. And I think that anyone that dares to step into a leadership role needs to have that level of humility and to understand that you will lead by example. And the best leaders aren't afraid to get their hands dirty and to role model what it takes, and not set these unrealistic expectations, or that, well, now I'm in this position, so I'm too good to do that. That attitude kills companies. Team members sense that. When they sense that the C-suite has become so distant, so detached from the work that's actually being done by the core team, you've got a problem there, and you will have team members that have no loyalty, that will easily go somewhere else, and obviously that costs the company a lot of money. And you don't have the same quality of work because there's no investment in it. Why should I work for this big cat in the C-suite when they could care less about us? They don't understand what we're going through. They're detached from the process.
And then all of the different departments get different messages from the C-suite because the C-suite aren't connected. And I find, working with organisations at all levels, I find that's one of the biggest challenges when C-suites aren't connected, that everyone is doing something different in the organisation. Then we have these things called silos where no one even talks to each other anyway. And it's like different organisations all in the one organisation. So that's probably a tip for our C-suites out there, or our senior leaders out there. Because it doesn't just have to be at C-suite, Laurie. This could be at, manager level or GM level, or even board level, that, the messaging needs to be the same. So,
yes.
Laurie Vann, you have been amazing. So, what is there'll be some people listening or viewing this, and if it's not now, because these things live in sort of, over time, if there's a human out there, that's really struggling, I guess maybe with self-harm at the moment, or suicidal tendencies, is there a message that you could give those people? And I know it's not that easy, but what would you say to those people based on 25 or 26 years now of clinical work, sort of working with these challenges in life? Is there a message?
I would say there's actually a couple of pieces to that. That one, they're not alone. Whatever they are struggling with is so much more common than what they realize. No one escapes life without some level of trauma. You just don't. And no one escapes life without having anxiety or depression at some point, because that's being human. But there is help out there, and there is definitely hope. There are resources available, and thankfully, because we do have the internet nowadays, you're not limited to just resources in your local town. That there are ways to find resources that are definitely international now, and I always believe in being a resource. So for those, specifically speaking on the self-injury piece, I have different resources on that. People can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn or on YouTube. I have a dedicated channel for self-injury that has just a handful out of the 320 interviews that I've given on a variety of topics. I've been able to like get back probably like 30 of them. And I have a channel for self-injury that has, well, about 30 interviews or so that focus just on that topic. And you can get so much education there. The Institute has an Instagram, there's a Facebook account, there's so many different resources. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find it. I'll try to connect with people and find the resource for you as best I can.
Laurie Vann, you have been fantastic. This is like just been an eye-opener. And I knew when we spoke in the States. So thank you for reaching, for responding to my call out for podcast guests. Yeah, it's an intriguing topic because, as you know, I work with a lot of leaders, and the psychology behind coaching or consulting itself. Some leaders, I feel for them because I see them one day and I just see some of the struggles they're going with, and I'm thinking I'm about to send them back into work, back into the fray, into a really, really volatile or a tough situation. And I know that there's sort of, I've had some that are really worried about, I've sort of tried to coach them to EAP or other programs. But again, it's really tough. Those leaders need to want to have that sort of a help and realise that, there is help out there. All those messages that you just shared, then you're not alone. You're not the only one going through this, and there's resources everywhere that can really help you work through these things. Laurie Vann, you're amazing. Oh, last question. And it might not come to your mind right now. If you wouldn't mind, would you mind connecting us? Would you mind introducing us, please? As JT says, don't ask for referrals, ask for introductions. Could you please introduce us to one or more humans that you think would be good for our podcast, pretty please, so that we can keep getting the message of influence out to the world? We'll follow up with an email if that's okay. And if you could put us in connection, that would be great.
That would be fine.
You're amazing. Laurie Vann, thank you so much. We appreciate having you on, and thanks for being punctual, and thanks for being amazing and giving with your time.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I very much appreciate it.
Lovely. Thanks, Laurie. We'll be in touch when the podcast episode comes out. Thank you for listening or viewing our Find Your Influence podcast with Anton Guinea. Another great chat. Please be one of the 10% of people who follow and subscribe and like our videos so that you can get more of them and you can hear more of our amazing conversations, the conversations that I get to have and that I get to share.